Hey everybody, and welcome to Epic Everyday, our weekday podcast for busy, stressed out Christians who want to do more than just survive. I'm Liz Frericks, and this is my husband, Evan.
Hi there.
And we're so glad you guys are here with us on this wonderful Wednesday.
Yeah, and it's kind of a dark and stormy night right now while we're recording this, so we'll see if we get through it without any sound effects.
Could be awesome.
Yeah.
Could be super epic.
Yeah.
More epic than normal.
Yeah, that's right.
Anyway, since it's Wednesday, we are talking about being centered. Being centered is living out of the essence of who God designed us to be. And this week, we've been talking about forgiveness, so we thought we'd talk about how to kind of process through that pain.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of living in the real world is being, acknowledging when we're hurt.
Right.
I mean, and, to understand forgiveness, I think. How are we going to really understand that if we don't acknowledge the severe need for forgiveness?
Right. I always found it so interesting in Christian circles. I think it's very prevalent to talk about forgive and forget in a way that means just minimize what happened.
Yeah, what they're really saying is don't feel it, I think.
Right.
Sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and by somehow not feeling it, you're making things better for the other person or something.
It's a kind of righteousness or self-righteousness somehow to not be bothered by things, and that maybe is seen as godliness. But
well, there are some verses in Proverbs about not being easily angered and easily offended, things like that. So we want to be that kind of person that is able to give grace to people. But when we're injured, we need to be able to say, "Oh yeah, you just stabbed me in the back and now I'm bleeding out,"
Wow. And if our example is God, I mean, he is very emotional. We see joy and laughter and anger and hurt. I mean,
right.
And we can express those things. Those are a gift from God, our feelings. And they're so enmeshed with our spiritual health, is our emotional health.
Right.
When, I've experienced so many Christians too who seem to want to, they're almost scared of strong emotions. And I know I struggle with that in my own self too. Strong emotions are kind of scary. They feel like it's starting to take you on a trip you don't want to go on, and that they start to feel like they're in control. And, through working on emotional maturity, we can do some work on that too. But the feelings are still good, even if they're strong.
Yeah, and we have to process those things. One of the examples I really like when talking about forgiveness and trauma and things like that is a car accident. Maybe the other person didn't intend to get into a car accident, but there's still a broken car. There's still work that has to be done. And if we just pretend that it didn't happen and keep driving our car around, that's going to cause all kinds of problems. As things go down the road, the longer you don't fix your car, the worse those problems get to be.
Yeah, I mean, and so to really kind of embrace what happened when you got in that car accident, you've got to have the insurance adjuster look at it. You've got to start to assess what actually got broken. Maybe it looks real bad, but it actually is not going to take that much to fix. Or, maybe you got in an accident where it doesn't look that bad, but you really messed up one of the axles or something that you can't generally see.
Right.
And it takes some work to really figure out what's going on. But if we're just minimizing it, we're like, you know what? It's probably fine.
Right.
Don't worry about it. That's not a wise way to live. And same with our emotions.
Yeah, it definitely, it can cause all kinds of problems. And it's not mean to say to someone, hey, we just got in a car accident. I think sometimes Christians think that it's mean or unloving to tell someone when you've been hurt.
I think feeling our feelings is also a good way to understand our own depravity. I mean, because there are things, like you said, there's verses like, don't be too angry, or don't let your anger carry you away. And if we start to see that in myself, if I start to see, oh, my anger really seems like it's taking a front seat here, then that's me helping me understand my problem too. Right. But if I'm ignoring that, then I may not realize that I'm an angry person. Because we are supposed to be growing and changing at the same time too.
Right.
And learning how to manage our emotions, but not ignore them.
If we don't do our own internal work and figure out what's going on with us. Like you were talking about with the insurance adjuster. If we don't do the work of figuring out where the problems are, we're never going to be... What is it that Shifu says in Kung Fu Panda 3? That if you only do what you can, you'll never be more than you are.
Yeah. We also, in embracing our emotions, I think a red flag people try to throw up is that I think we're worried that if we acknowledge our pain, and if it's a big pain, a big deal pain, like a major wrong, against us, and if we embrace that fully, that will somehow become a barrier to forgiveness, because then we'll just be so all consumed by it. But
right.
The big or the small pain, in God's perspective, like we've already talked about it this week, like in light of the cross and in our sin against God, that is not a barrier to forgiveness, the ability to forgive in our heart.
Right.
Even if we, take that assessment and decide this is a pretty big deal or this is not a big deal, both of those we can engage in forgiveness because of the grace of God.
I just totally agree with that. I think that makes so much sense. Maybe not when you first... I don't know. It's just such a mind shift. I remember when I was first trying to wrap my brain around this and being like, wait a minute. So you mean I don't pretend like I didn't get hurt, and and we're going to talk tomorrow about reconciliation, the process of actually, talking to someone about the problem and working through it in the context of the relationship. But that whole shift to say, I need to deal with my problems. I need to deal with my hurt. I need to, figure out what boundary was it that they broke. Why am I angry?
Yeah. And, I think to come back to the car accident analogy, once we've done the work of assessing the damage, and I mean, that's what insurance is for, right? Then we cast the things we can't handle into the lap of the insurance company.
Right.
And, if we don't understand why we're feeling so strongly about this thing, or what we're even feeling, we just know we have strong emotion, but what is it even? And I've got to figure that out. But then, we are here over and over in the Bible to cast our cares upon God and to take our burdens to Him, and the burden that He gives us is light in exchange. Like, there's actual work to do there of like, God, I'm so angry about this and I don't want to be, or
right.
I'm really sad. I got so hurt and I can't seem to let it go. Like, this is the work of managing those emotions, is to give them to God and be like, what am I supposed to do with this? I don't understand. I can't seem to not feel this way.
Yeah.
And I want to see the situation the way you do. So if we're minimizing our feelings, we're going to miss out on that important growth, really. We're going to miss out on those rich and life-giving prayers.
Well, and those opportunities to grow in our relationship with God and to be more, the people God's designed us to be. Mm-hmm. Because every time we get into a car accident, it's showing us something about ourselves. Like, that was another thing that was really transformative for me, was just how much information you can gather when you are in a situation where you've been wronged.
Yeah.
Because usually, not always, but usually there's something there that is a weakness that they're cashing in on, Like we've talked about with our car situation, how, we know that that's a weakness that Satan can be like, all right, if I want to stress them out, I just break the car. Right. And I've talked before about the grappling hook analogy, how, if you have a castle wall, and if the wall is completely smooth, it doesn't matter how many times somebody throws a grappling hook at it, it's not going to stick. The problem is when there's like little, protrusions where the rocks are not quite smooth that they can hook onto, or if they can get all the way to the top of the castle wall. Those things that people are hooking into are usually, for me anyway, they're usually lies that I believe about myself, about God, about the world, about other people. And so if I can do the work of assessing the damage and working through the damage, it helps me see like, oh, well, maybe the reason why this happened is because I have a tendency to get into bad relationships.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think when people are are preaching against, don't go down that road of that feeling. There's such an entanglement of stuff like that where it's like a genuine wrong happened to me and I've got a pretty good idea of what happened and why, and we're going to meet that head on and everybody kind of knows what happened, versus somebody does something to me and then I'm immediately back in my 5-year-old self. So maybe they're preaching against, don't dredge up all the hurts from the past, just try to maintain the hurt and the problem now. But how can you do that if you're not dealing with it? If we've got a backlog of feelings, we've got to start dealing with them.
Right.
Otherwise we're going to remain stuck there. And again, come back to God. And there's some powerful healing work we can do in our Christian communities as well. And we're going to kind of get into some of that on Friday. We do some real important heart work by ourselves in our prayer closets, and we do some real important heart work and emotion work in our groups.
Right.
And they're both important.
And, every time somebody, something happens and immediately you're back in your 5-year-old self, or you're back in, the last time they did something like that.
Yeah, or a previous relationship.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Whatever it is, that's a therapeutic opportunity. Yeah. It's kind of like, if you get a kind of poison, like if you get a snake bite or something, and they have to pull the poison back out of that wound, suck the poison back out so that it's not spreading throughout your whole body, that re-traumatization or that, bringing that stuff up to the forefront of your mind is kind of bringing that poison right to the surface. And so it's an opportunity for you to get it all sucked out and cleaned out instead of having it flowing through your veins all the time.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. And we don't want to get stuck minimizing, because we're going to have to deal with it at some point.
Right.
And the longer we put it off, the more kind of compound and confusing it becomes. I mean, emotions are important. It's part of the way God made us. It's kind of like our instrument panel in your car. The different lights go off when there's different things happening. And if you don't pay attention to those lights, you're going to burn up your engine or whatever. So it's going to be a problem.
Don't drive the car without any gas in it.
Yeah, was it James Thurber's mother or grandmother would say that? You'll fry the cylinders or something.
Well, hopefully that gives us all some stuff to think about, because doing that internal work is so key in order to pave the way for reconciliation, which is what we're going to talk about tomorrow. So we need both pieces, but we have to do this piece before we can actually do the reconciliation piece.
Yeah. And hey, we made it through the storm. I don't think, we mentioned it, and I don't think it even came through on the recording. So
guess not.
But anyway.
As always, pick whether today is going to be awesome or not, whether you're going to strengthen those neural pathways to look for the good or to look for the bad. We love you guys, and we're praying for you. Thanks to everybody that's been sharing the show and listening to the show. We really appreciate it. If you have found this podcast helpful, please do continue to share it. And come back tomorrow, and we will continue our discussion on forgiveness. And we're going to talk about reconciliation and why that's not the same thing.
Right. We're going to distinguish them, and they're both important and good, but they are different.
Yes. All right, you guys. Have an awesome Wednesday.
See you later.